So my guest today is Jack Adams. Now, Jack and I have had a few conversations, and you are such an interesting man. Jack is an author, but he's a philosopher. And one of the subjects that we talked about last time was synchronicity. And so we said, well, let's record that as one of the first interviews that we do, because I want to hear your thoughts on synchronicity. Jack, welcome and thank you for joining me. Can you explain what synchronicity is?
Well,
in simple terms for people like me.
well, for all of us really, because it's an interesting idea. I mean, it's posited by Carl Jung originally, and the simplest way to really understand synchronicity is the idea that connections are made not by causes but by meaning. That there's associated meanings that bring people together, as opposed to causes and actions. And that was what Jung was talking about when he talked about synchronicity. So we, for example, have arranged to meet this afternoon at 3 o'clock, and that's causal. We have a causal meeting. But if we just switched on our computers and, for example, we just suddenly connected without any necessary causal meaning, that would be what Jung was describing as synchronicity, that somehow it's meaning that's driving us together as opposed to cause. It's a bit more complicated than that, but that's a sort of like the easy skinny on it.
Because, you know, quite often, particularly in my work, that I do, I hear people that because they're quite often they're trying to make meaning of a situation that they're in, and they will find or they'll tell me stories of things that have happened that mean something to them. So they kind the event happens, and then they kind of work the story around it to get what I'm saying. Like I wasn't meant to meet John. I didn't know John at all, and then it turned out that John had got this, and we suddenly realised, and you know that's what I'm understanding it to be. And you told me your story of when you met a man in the street or saw a man in the street, and can you tell that story again? The story of how you met the man.
It's quite, and it's probably a very good illustration of what synchronicity is. I had a Churchill Fellowship to go to Australia to research Indigenous relationships between elders and youth. I decided I wanted to go get myself a digital camcorder, they'd just come out then. This was 1997, in fact 1996, and they'd just come out. These were brand new toys. So I went to Tottenham Court Road, which is the obvious place to go if you're a Londoner, to go and buy the latest bit of digital camera kit. And as I was walking along Tottenham Court Road, I looked across the road, and there was walking a man that could be nothing but an Indigenous elder.
How did you know that?
Well, obviously, you know, I've been looking at the culture. So already I know it's not just some sort of spiritual connection. I've already looked to recognise particular forms and faces and what people look like in that particular culture.
So you approached him?
He had a hat on, he had a black face, he looked classic Indigenous man with grey hair. So he was an old Indigenous man, clear as daylight. So I didn't approach him. What I did was I followed him. I stalked him. I didn't have the courage. I didn't have the courage to just walk up to a man in the middle of Tottenham Court Road and go, "Hi, I'm Jack. I'd like to speak to you." So I thought, well, I'll just follow him for a bit and see where this guy goes. And he went into a bookshop. I went into the bookshop. He was talking to the person in the bookshop. And after a while, I approached him then much more naturally and said, you know, "Excuse me, do you mind if I have a chat with you?" And we got to know each other at that point.
And it turned out he was an Indigenous.
Oh yeah, oh
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely. His name is Uncle Herb Wharton, which anyone can look up. HERBWHRARTON. Uncle Herb Wharton, and he's quite famous as well because he's an Indigenous poet, and he was on his way up to the Edinburgh Festival. So he was exactly the sort of man that I wanted to talk to anyway. And we could say that that's synchronicity in action.
Do you think
Because,
that because I like the idea that you can manifest, do you think that you were looking for something and you brought it into your existence? Do you think that's possible?
well, I think we have to be very careful with these ideas. I think we I don't want to be dismissive because I'm not. I'm very open to them. All right. But also because I approach things from very much an academic stance, I like to try and formulate them in rational and reasonable ways which allow for deeper meaning than we can actually perceive, if that makes sense to you.
Right.
So I think, and I've thought about this several times, you see, there could be 1,000 people walking down Tottenham Court Road, and they might be 1,000 people who are going to Australia to see indigenous culture or something. And they might all look across the road and see the Indigenous man. The difference in my case is I chose to do something about it. Now, we could say that I manifest it because I think that every day, all of these synchronicities and opportunities are all around us, but we walk past them. We look at the Indigenous man and go, oh, isn't that wonderful? That's an Indigenous man. And I'm going to Australia, and carry on walking instead of engaging with that moment and connecting with that moment, and then making something happen. Now, you could say that that's free will. You could say that's manifesting something. You could look at it from different approaches. I don't say one approach is right. I prefer that we all share together and look at positions from different approaches and say all of them are part of the cake that makes that particular synchronistic moment.
Right, okay. But then so you're introducing choice
Mm-hmm.
into it, where so let me tell you a story that happened to me which was really bizarre. It was really I didn't choose at all, it just happened.
Okay.
I had started a piece of bereavement work with a group in America, and I'd been talking to a woman in America who'd set up a charity. Now we'd never met, and we talked very infrequently. It was, in the beginning, it was more than later on. Maybe a year, 2 years later, we're still occasionally exchanging emails. But we were talking about different work that was going on, etc., etc. On holiday in Turks and Caicos, my daughter comes running up the beach, and she's very into the arts. And she says, "Mum, there's a 15-year-old girl on holiday in our hotel, and she said she'd teach me to dance. Can I go?" And I said, well, let me come and see what's going on there. So I go along, and this girl's mother is with her, and she says, "Hi, are you Tilly's mum?" And I say, "Yes." And we start talking. And it turns out that this mother of this child is the woman that I've been writing to. Because we start talking about, what do you do? And she says, "Oh, I live here, and I run a charity." And I say, "Oh, I do that too." And she says, "Oh, I know someone in England, Alex." And I say, "I am Alex. You can't possibly be whatever her," I've forgotten her name now,
Yeah.
which is dreadful.
Yeah.
But we just stood there, and I mean, it was just the most bizarre thing. So that wasn't a choice, really. That was an event that just unfolded. I mean,
Well, I don't want to sort of like bring into it the idea that things can't happen spontaneously, because, you know, if we think about how the universe began and how we understand the universe began, our only understanding of that is spontaneously at this moment in time. You know, the Big Bang is a spontaneous event that supposedly, you know, we can discuss all of that, but it supposedly comes out of nothing. So spontaneity, the idea of things happening, is part of the nature of the reality, the universal, the multiversal reality we're in. It's actually part of the nature of how things work. So I think that the thing about meaning is important. And you mentioned meaning in your work. See, meaning is something that we human beings impose upon situations. We project meaning. We create meaning. It, it's one of our skills. When I'm talking, I'll be using, you know, quite a lot of words that sometimes carry pejorative meanings. People look at them and think, oh, that's quite a negative way to look at it. But I never use words in that sense. I use the words in quite a sort of a dictionary sense, that, you know, when we project something, that doesn't have to be a negative, psychological, you've got a problem because you're projecting meaning. I think we all project meaning. It's part of what makes our psychology. So how we understand meaning and how we then project meaning into the situations we find ourselves, and then how we account for things that apparently have no causal relationship, therefore synchronicity, because it's the meaning that we're attaching to the moment. It's the meaning of how on earth did we two end up here? But not just that, but that my daughter met your daughter and talked about
Yeah.
dancing. I mean, it's bizarre, all right? But we live in a universe, in a universal reality, in which we can only explain 4% of it. That's the physics. That's the science. It's, you know, it's not open to debate here. If you believe in the science, we can't describe 96% of the universe doesn't fit into our mathematical model of what's real. Now, if you want to make certainties based on 4% of what you observe, you're very quickly going to fall over on your face, aren't you? So I think we have to accept that in the reality in which we exist, things are a hell of a lot more complex than very simple answers. And that a lot of our simple answers, like causality, like mathematics, actually represent 4% of what it is that we actually know and can show to be correct. There's obviously and clearly a lot more going on in and around us than we are necessarily aware of. So as human beings with our consciousness, what we try to do is, in the face of all of this uncertainty, in the face of this lack of knowledge, we try to create meaning, because for us meaning is important.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that we're right. It doesn't mean that we're wrong. It doesn't mean that a 1,000 years from now, people aren't going to look at this conversation and say, oh, how quaint are those two? They thought that. We move on. We move on. The real thing is about celebrating being alive, understanding that life is very complicated internally and externally. All right. And then thinking, how lucky am I to be able to enjoy this? How lucky for you that you went to the Turks and Caicos and you had that experience. How did it make you feel? How did it make you feel in that moment when you realised that both of you had come together?
I was totally shocked. And I think she was. And in fact, we did. The strangest thing is we didn't actually spend a lot of time together, because I think the shock of it. And I didn't keep in touch with her either. But it's just like one of those things. But I have many of those things.
So
And
do
when
I.
you were saying about going around looking, maybe it is, you know, a friend of mine says every day, don't forget to look up.
Yeah.
Always look up. We don't look up enough. So anything could be
Absolutely.
happening up above us, but we don't look up. And when you look up, you do start to see different things. a different perspective. But it's just, it happens to me such a lot. Now, I would agree that perhaps some people have had these things happen to them, but maybe they're not attuned to it. So they're going along, and like you say, these things are happening to them too, but they're just not attuned to it. An event might make them attuned to it. Something might be triggered for them in their lifestyle, or something that makes them suddenly have that experience. But
sorry, they're living uncomplicated lives.
yeah.
If you know what I mean. Like, I'm some of the psychological research is quite fascinating, and it seems to indicate that although we think of ourselves as intelligent, perceptive, engaging, thoughtful creatures, that most of us just follow behavior patterns. And I'm sure you'll know that from the psychology of the work that you do, that most people get up every day, have their breakfast, get on their train, get in their car, go to work, follow the pattern. There's no difference between them leading their life and the way a tiger goes through the jungle, following the same path, smelling the same scents, stalking the same, these patterns, and actually our cognitive and perceptive abilities generally amongst the human population are actually much lower than we like to think they are. Now, again, I'm coming back to what I said earlier. I don't think this is a good or a bad thing. I'm not interested in good or bad. I'm just interested in the way it is. I'm not saying that people who live like that are not as good as I am, or I'm better than them, or anything like that. I think it's just about how you choose to engage in life, and our freedom should be to choose to engage in the way that makes us most happy and most comfortable.
So are you saying then that you and I, we have an awareness that we've chosen, that we look for these synchronicities, and therefore we recognize them, whereas probably everybody's having them, but some people are more limited in what or maybe their lives are so busy in their everyday tasks that they don't necessarily recognize the synchronicities around them, because they haven't got the capacity or the space,
All the
or
time.
they're not attuned, maybe.
All the time, or they don't find them interesting. You see, we can't go into, again, the sort of like the pejorative language with people, because I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's even appropriate. The universe is very, very complicated. It's extremely complicated on many different levels. And we are complicated on many different levels. And we get given, I mean, this is down to we're going into my own philosophy of what we actually are.
Well, we're talking about you, so that's really good. Let's hear it.
You see, in a 13.8 billion year old universe, when you have a life of 60 or 70 years of your own individual consciousness, I think that the analogy I like to use that helps people focus on what that means. If you think of a big 4-bedroom detached house, everyone can see that and think that that's the universe. Well, if you wanted to find my lifetime in that house, you'd have to get on your hands and knees in the cellar with a microscope to find it. That's how small amount of time we actually have in that building of the universe. It's very, very short. It comes into existence and it goes out of existence. And what we do know is that we've got a big problem with the mythology of monotheism, because
I don't even understand that word.
monotheism is essentially Judaism, Christianity, Islam. It's
Right.
the one God position. Before
Okay.
monotheism, there were many gods, Before there were many gods, there were many spirits. The difference between the indigenous and then the early city states, and then moving to this new idea that there's only one God. And the problem with the only one God idea, which we see in the book of Genesis, is that human beings are set apart from nature. There's nature and then there's human beings. And from that, we get many, if you like, issues and problems because we don't see ourselves as part of nature. Indigenous people, they don't see the difference between themselves and the world around them. We always set ourselves apart, and that creates a real issue, both psychologically and sociologically. So our, our big issue is that if we set apart, it's very difficult for us to understand ourselves of part of something. And I'm going to use this word, which is utterly magical. The concept of what we know through quantum physics now of the universe and how the universe works, even at 4%, you should be standing there with your mouth open and your eyes dripping tears in awe that you are actually alive. And if we look at the quantum reality, what we see is, do you know, like when you switch off the television at the end of the night, you used to be able to do that and it all goes and there's just that white
Yeah.
noise.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in many respects, that's the quantum reality. That's the universe we live in, where small particles come into being and go out of being instantly, like almost the fizz on a glass of Enos. It's effervescent. The nature of the universe, and physicists use this word, is effervescence, and it's multi-dimensional, and within that effervescence and that multi-dimensional structure, there is no individual perspective. But imagine if you just like a piece of, imagine it's a piece of clay on a wheel, but it's made of all this effervescent sort of stuff, and it's on. But you put your finger in and you twist a little bit and you pull it out for a moment, and you just pull it out and you trap it in 4 dimensions. And because of the nature of the universe, it can hold it there for maybe 60, 70 years, but then it pings back in. And that's us. We are the universe looking at it ourselves. We are the universe giving itself an individual perspective of what it is that's around us. Because our very thoughts, the very conversation, the very structure of everything we're seeing now is made of that quantum reality, is made of that effervescence.
I'm
So
beginning to get
we are.
lost.
We are the universe looking at itself. That's and it's an incredible gift, because in order to do that, you can't have everything buzzing and crackling everywhere with no definition. You have to contain within an individual experience, which is us. You contain it within an individual experience, which is our consciousness, which gets the chance over a period of 60 now to 100 years to look at things and think, wow, look at that sunset. Like, isn't that amazing? That's a local star. I'm looking at a star that's 8 minutes. I'm looking at where it was 8 minutes ago. I'm not looking at where it is now. When I look up at the night sky, I'm looking at those stars where they were 5 million years ago. I'm in a time machine, for goodness sake. And once you start to engage then with the universe and how beautiful and how awesome it is, when you arrive in the Turks and Caicos, all right, and you meet someone that you've been corresponding with, you can equally sit back and go, do you know what? In this place, in this space, do you know, I'm not surprised. It can happen. It does happen. It's part of what it is. You know, when I ended up in Queensland 8 months after I'd met the guy in Tottenham Court Road, and I'm standing there in the middle of the bush in a place called Woodford, in Queensland when I'd grown up as a child in Woodford in Essex, and suddenly there's a hand on my shoulder, and there's Herb Wharton saying to his Indigenous mates, "Oh, here's a white fella I met in Tottenham Court Road." Like, you know, okay, we can lay a meaning onto it. We can look at synchronicity. We can use words to describe it. I think what I'd advocate for everybody is enjoy it, love it, embrace it, and look for more of it, because it is out there. And whether Jung is right in the way he describes synchronicity, whether there's another way of looking at things, which is something that I'm working on now, it doesn't matter. It doesn't, in the great scheme of things, it doesn't matter. This is all just about us trying to construct meaning so that we can gain understanding of who we are and what we are, and how we relate to each other, and how we love and care for each other, and how in your world, when someone dies, how we, I was going to use the word deal with it, but deal with it seems, you're the person to talk these words. I mean, how does a person engage with the experience of losing someone who's precious?
Well, you see, that's it. When we start to talk about consciousness is not a visible thing. Is it? So I know we're moving a little bit away from synchronicity. So where I sit with that now is that I think consciousness, I think this is probably the vehicle for the consciousness. And when this wears out, I don't know that the consciousness is gone. So what we're actually missing is the form of the person, because we can't miss their consciousness, because we never saw that anyhow. So, I mean, you can drive yourself mad trying to, which I think I could probably do, but do you get what I'm saying? That the essence of the person, the energy of that person has to be part of what you're talking about, the energy of the universe, then, because it can't die, can it? Energy can't be destroyed, can it?
No, the energy just folds back in. It's like I said, you pull that little bit out, you twist that little bit out, which holds together almost, and then it pings back in, but it's still the same energy is still there.
So the consciousness, the main consciousness, which is the universe, of which we are all part,
exactly,
and have always existed, except that we develop our own little bit of consciousness for a very short period of lifetime within a vehicle.
The universe creates little bits of definition here and there, and that's us.
Yeah,
it creates this underlying quantum effervescence.
So what we miss when somebody dies is we miss the form of them, we miss the presence of them. We can't miss the memory of them, because the memory of them is what we have. We have that already. And we can't miss the future of them, because none of us have the future. The future is a perceived thing, because none of us know. We only have the moment. So, when we talk about missing, I'm trying to do a lot more work about not rubbing people out. And, there's a lovely image somebody gave me the other day, is that and it might have been you, actually, I might be feeding this back to you. Was it you that said about when we go up the hill and we leave the bags? Yes, it is you who said that. Well, I've kind of captured that in my mind, and I like it. And I'm thinking what we should be doing is, as people go up to the top of the hill, they should be handing those cases over to us to unpack, because that's their journey that then stays with us, rather than us. And then we get into this Alzheimer's thing, and where people are leaving before they've gone. And if we could just capture people a bit more, and if we could talk a bit more about what happens when we're not here, I think we could appreciate more what we do when we're here, kind of, and then we could capture stories and develop
Can I share something with you on that particular note?
Yes, do, because I'm getting myself tied up in circles, and I'm mindful that you're sort of really clever.
No. I'm just a human being. You know,
I don't think there's any
just,
just in being a human
yeah,
being
hold
either,
on.
is there?
Yeah, hold on. Let me just.
Was it that bad that you're leaving?
Where are we? Here we go. And this is a little story around the meaning of life, the meaning of lives, and based on what you're saying about capturing and holding. Um, this is the industrial book for boys industrial information.
All right.
And you know, you can see on my shelves over
Very
there.
old books, yes.
I I collect very old books, and and I treasure them because, and this is, I'm going to show you why, one of the reasons why I treasure them. This book is from 1856, 58. All right. It it's an amazing book. All right. It's
Yeah.
got illustrations of every industrial process going on in the United Kingdom in 1858. So all sort. I can just open it like that, and you'll see there's all sorts of illustrations and a description of the process. It's got gold leaf on three sides, which is always a sign of an expensive book. Um, and this is why it's important. Let's see, can I get that in there?
No.
All right, so you can see that. You can
Robert
see the
Edward Gregory, a
yeah.
present from his father.
I'll
Right,
read it for
okay.
you. Robert Edward Gregory, a
Yeah.
present from his father on his 16th of birthday, April the 3rd, 1860. It's been cut out, but I've worked it out. It's 1864 because I've actually gone and found the birth certificate for Robert Edward Gregory's son, Edward Gregory. Now, again, let's just bang that so people can see it. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, just about.
And it's the ink. Look at the ink. Look at the browning of the ink.
Yeah.
At some point, 160 years ago, it's 160 years ago, a father bought this book, all right, and gave it to his son on his 16th birthday. And the inscription tells you something about the love the father felt for the son. It also tells you something about the lives of those two people. This would have been a middle class family because of the nature of the book, because it's got gold leaf, it's an expensive book in its
Mm-hmm.
day. It's also a book that's got a whole load of information in. So, um, and 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 this is a time in Victorian England where people were just, they considered engineering like we consider the internet and artificial intelligence. It's absolutely the cutting edge engineering. So all of this stuff is great information. So there's, in those words, in that handwriting, is a huge amount of love and devotion a father has for a son, and a son who then opens up the book on his 16th birthday and has a little treasure house of stuff, who probably pored over it and enjoyed every moment of it. Now, if I hadn't bought this book, the chances are it would have gone in a skip and got burnt, because that's how we value our books, our old books today. It's not a valuable book, because it's not a first edition, it's not by someone famous, and that's how we value things today. But for me, and with all the books you see there that have all been held by other hands and other lives, I would imagine that the Gregory father and son, this is the last vestige of their mortal life that is left. I would bet that their gravestones are probably worn with and illegible. I would bet that nobody remembers who these people are. I would bet there's nothing left of their lives within the popular human memory of our time except for this book. And I collect my books as much as, not so much a duty, but I see myself as a custodian to keep alive these last memories of people who have lived. And they've gone. I can trace a few footsteps. It's like you come across, footsteps in rocks in the north of England, which are from people that lived here a million years ago. And you can put your feet in their footsteps. And that's what I do with my books. All of the books none of them are fiction. A lot of them have got inscriptions. Sometimes I find things inside them. I pay about £2 to £3 for these books. Otherwise, they'd get burnt and thrown away. I love the sociological information, the historical information within them. But most of all, I know this might sound morbid, but I think of my books as a mausoleum of memory.
But what's going to happen when you die?
Well, I'm dealing with that at the moment. I'm trying. I'm trying, because I've just done my will, rewritten my will. I've had a word with my son, and he says, Dad, in all honesty, I'm not as interested in them as you are. He said, I will do whatever you want me to do. He said, but honestly, if you can find someone who feels like them, like you feel about them, then please leave those books to that person. So I'm engaged in a quest now, and have been for the last couple of months, to find someone sort of who might well enjoy these books in the same and take on what I've started. I'm not looking forward to dying very quickly, so I'm hoping I'm going to be around. So I'm looking for someone who, at the time when I do die, might be in their 40s, all right, and might then be in a position in their life to be able to take on something like this, because it is a thing. But coming back to exactly what you're saying, this is why I use this example, you see, exactly what you're saying about how the spirit, if you like, the emotion, the history of the human life, we lose something of that. And what's left in us, I believe, in the pain, is the memory of all of that. It's the memory of the touch, the feel, the little idiosyncrasies. We miss the people that are now no longer with us. And it's deeply profound. So I think your work, what you do, I think is awesome. I think it's incredible, to be able.
Oh, thank you.
Well, it is. It's powerfully emotional material, and to be willing to sit and be with people who are hurting in such a bad way and absorb some of that hurt and pain, because you have to take it on, like
Well,
in some sense.
I suppose what I'm doing really, I don't see it in that same way. I say bear to be present and bear to listen. But actually, what I'm doing is I'm facilitating them in what we're talking about, making the meaning of what it means for them. And also trying really hard to get people to say, actually, I am unique. And what I feel is as unique as the relationship with the person that has gone. And so it's unique. And we can't just throw people together and say, oh, we've all had the same experience, therefore you'll all be able to talk about it, because we're all unique. But I'm just going back to your books. I found a little Bible. A dear old friend of mine died 20 years ago, and in his house, it was like time had stood still in his house, because he'd lived there as a little boy with his
Oh,
parents,
wow.
and they had died, and he had not got married, and all his stories were there. And I found a Bible, and in the front of the Bible, and this, every time I read, I wished I'd known we were going to do this, because it's by the side of my bed. But when we finish doing this, I'm going to show you, because it's so, these two women are talking, and one of them was written in the Bible, will you stop to see Mr. Brown or something on your way out of church? I will if mother isn't looking, something like that. And they've used the Bible, their prayer book, to communicate, and I've been left with this image of these two women sharing this little naughty conversation that they're having about what sounds like the vicar. I
Well,
don't know, that they
they're probably
fancied
doing
him,
it. They're probably doing it in church, aren't they? They're
Yeah,
doing it during mass.
yeah, really naughty to write in the
Because
Bible. What would have happened if they'd done that?
I
And
love them. I love them.
I tell you what, it's such a treasure, and sometimes but I haven't taken it as far as you have, and really felt the emotion. But I think I was on the edge of that. I
Well,
sometimes see the
I
image of
think
them.
you have. Like what you've got in your hands is an imprint in the sand of their emotional and
Yeah.
psychological life. And that should be true. We don't need to be throwing these books into skips. We don't need to be burning them.
Well, maybe you
It's,
should start a museum of your own stories through books, and just have all the ones that have got the. I'm sure a museum would love to have a display, because people would like to read it. People are inquisitive. They'd like to read people's birthday messages and things that they've done, would they not?
yeah. Well, there's different responses to that. One, time. All right, because I have enough time just getting these books and reading all of these books and going through these books, doing all my work, doing all my writing, working and all the other stuff, to start then on a project to try and create a museum, as much as I would love to. In fact, I wouldn't even call it a museum. I'd call it a library. Let's just call it a library of love, or a library of, like, call it like that, and give access for people. And the last thing you'd want to do is digitize them and put them on. You lose it completely once you do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, you've got to
But
be able to see them, haven't you, and feel them. I mean, that little
the
Bible, it's tiny, it's like this, but that message in it is.
well, coming back to the main thrust of the synchronicity and tying these particular points up about how people are special, um, and how we are special. Everything I've been talking about in terms of the universe, the multiverse, the way it works, the science behind it. I know we only understand 4%. That makes us incredibly special. In one of my books, which is called Toes Curling Crumbly Edge, which is about
Are
it's
you
about the
kidding me?
no,
Did you write that, or is that a proper
yeah,
title? You wrote
no,
it.
I wrote it. That's what my book's called, Toes Curling Crumbly Edge. All right, it's a line from a poem, from one of my poems,
Ah,
and it's the idea of our mortality, that we're standing on the edge of the abyss, if you like, or returning into the universe, and
mm.
our toes are curling round the crumbly edge all the time. So
Oh,
it
I
was that. So
like that. Yeah.
so the so the what I say at the end of One Piece there is that in a universe where we are the smallest of small improbabilities is the largest of opportunities. That the very fact that we are so small, and I won't use the word insignificant, because we're not insignificant, we're very important, but we're so small, you have to get on your knees with that microscope in the basement to try and find a life down there. It's so small, it's so tiny in the scale of things, but the opportunity is enormous. It's huge. And for each one of us, within my Toes Curling Crumbly Edge book, I have this thing which is my straw theory. It goes like this. You go into a pub, you go into a room, you go anywhere, and in walks Fred, the most boring person on the planet. He could be the most dislikable person. He could be the nastiest person. He could be whatever it is you want. But let's just be a bit more generous and say, this is just the most boring person you've ever met. He's got nothing to say about anything. He's of no interest, but he insists on talking to you for the next 20 minutes. And you desperately want to escape and you desperately want to go away, and you're not really engaging with him as a human being because he's just there presenting this bland face. But you see, in the choice of being who you are, of being Alex, you didn't make that choice. You didn't make that decision. It's almost like there's, like when you pick a straw out of a pot. You pick a straw, you get a long one or a short one, you get this.
Yeah.
Fred picked the Fred straw. And that's really, we love Fred for doing that. Because if he hadn't got it, I might have picked it. And I really don't want to do what Fred's doing. In an eternity of awe and beauty, I don't want to spend 60 years being Fred. And so thank you, Fred. I love you, Fred. All right. So for 20 minutes in my life, I'm going to stand and I'm going to listen to Fred, and I'm going to love him and hug him in so many different ways. All right. Because that's who Fred is. And if he hadn't taken the Fred straw, damn it, I might have got it and I wouldn't have been happy about
that. That's really funny. That is really funny. Yeah. So how do you just tell me, because you have this massive stuff going on and in your head. How? I mean, it's beyond me. Some of the stuff that you're saying is beyond me. And I have another friend who is very into this. I don't know what you call it even. What is it called? It must be, is it philosophy? Because I think I'm into philosophy in a way, but not like this. This is beyond my thought. I can kind of follow so far, but not,
Well, my thing is mythology. I'm a mythographologist. That's what I am. And I'm the only mythographologist
in the world.
Is. Yeah, probably. And mythographology is about understanding mythology and categorizing mythologies. Now, where I started with it was 30, 40 years ago, when I read Campbell's work, which we mentioned before, where he said mythology and therefore civilization. And I looked at it and I thought to myself, what is this man saying? That civilization and mythology are synonymous, that they're the same thing? That seems like, and then I read all his work and I came to the conclusion he was a genius and he was right. So I spent the rest of my life investigating, studying, writing academically, publishing about how the human psyche mythologizes as part of its evolutionary strategy. And to be a mythographologist is to be someone who categorizes and describes all the mythologies of the human mind. That's what it is. Mythographic is a word that describes how mythologies are listed and categorized. I've created the term mythographologist because it best describes what I do.
Well, I don't feel so bad now for not knowing that, seeing as you invented it. But what I wanted to say to you then, are we saying then that, okay, synchronicity and all of these things are there because they are, and you're, as human beings, these little specks, there must be something going on with us that's different, because if you look at animals, they seem to exist. They eat, they mate, they live, they die, they live. That's it. But we don't do that. We have to explore and unpick and try to understand and make meaning of. And we can't, because we can't know all of the answers, because like you said in the beginning, we're only
Whoa.
4%, do we actually know? Is that
Okay. Okay. So what you've actually done is you've segued right into the discussion on mythographology and comparative mythology. In my work, I've argued that one of the things, not the only thing, one of the things that determines Homo, and it's not even right to say Homo sapiens, because Homo erectus is also capable of this as well. It's part of our Homo lineage. There's a whole load of problems about describing our evolutionary background, which is subject to a whole load of academic and anthropological and archaeological mythologies. They are mythologies, and I can show that. That one of the critical things that sets us apart from all the other animals is that we mythologize, that we are mythogenetic. We create mythologies because our awareness, there is awareness in animals. Elephants are the most amazing. I love elephants. I can watch elephants all day long. They're the most incredible animals, and they have huge sensitivities and social connections, and they understand death. You know, like and we look at our close cousins, the bonobo chimpanzee, the bonobos. Chimpanzees one thing, bonobos another. But anyway, so the forest dwelling chimpanzees we call bonobos. You look at those, and they have relationships, and they have a whole interesting society of sexual engagement, which is very strange for us to look at, but actually has a lot of relationships with us. But none of the animals have the imaginative capacity to create symbolic art.
Actually, that's it. That's the word that I was looking for. Imagination. We are the only beings with imagination, are we not?
To create, no, they do have imagination. We can see imagination within crows. The Reunion Island crows are just the most amazing creatures. They can build 4-part tools to source. You know, they've got the imagination and the capacity to do it. But there's one thing to have an imagination. It's another thing to create symbology, to create a symbol. All right, that one thing means something else, because you have to be able to you have to look at something conceptually and be able to look at and say, not only is this a horse, but it also is a symbol for being quick and fast. All right, so you have to be able to hold two different concepts within one image, and that's something other animals can't do. And our problem with our consciousness, and going back to all of the discussion we've had today, is that once you become aware and conscious of your own mortality and conscious, you have two fundamental questions, which is, where are we and what are we? And in a universe where we can only describe 4%, we've got no chance of answering where we are. And in terms of our own consciousness, and despite recent work and a fantastic publication in October 2020 about the magnetism in the brain, by a Scottish academic, really interesting paper. But besides that, we've got no real description of what it is we act, not our body, but the bit between our ears, us, that spirit, that sense, that soul. We can't describe that. Now, if you are living in a conscious reality and you can't describe what you are or where you are, that's the path to psychosis. That's what that is. All right. So what you've got is you've got an evolutionary animal, the Homo, the genus Homo, who've developed awareness in order to survive. Rather than adapt their body to environment, they adapt the environment to their body. They build fires, they wear skins, they change the environment around them as they move. They can even go out into space where nothing can live because they change the environment around them. And they can do all of that, all right? And those are the benefits. But the worm in the apple of evolution for the genus Homo is that awareness then makes them realize they don't know where they are or what they are. So what they do is they mythologize. They create symbols, they create stories. And once you create symbols and stories, and that is the purpose of myth, is it stabilizes the psyche of the individual and of the group. And it's our mythologies that are important.
So if we go back to the synchronicity, that's all part of the mythology, then you're saying it's us trying to find reason where there perhaps, or meaning where there perhaps isn't any. And you started off by saying that, you know, if we just accepted, if we just accepted that, like the man who's going down the road and doesn't see it, but we see it. I mean, you could turn yourself round in circles, couldn't you? Just trying to make meaning of who you are. Perhaps those people that just go along and don't is because maybe they know that there's no point because we're not going to get anywhere.
my advice on encountering synchronicity, all right, which is only a description of something conjured up by a man called Carl Jung, who's a transitional process from monotheism into something different that we're currently evolving as a mythology now. Just a transitional process. That if you encounter what you recognize as synchronicity in your life, smile and embrace it and love life. Don't worry about whether there's, you know, just enjoy it and treasure it. What wonderful moments they are, you know, and we tend now to spend far too much time trying to break down all these sort of intellectual ideas. It's a great, I'm sure you're aware of this, it's one thing to intellectually know something. It's another thing to emotionally become that information. And that's the difference between intellectual maturity and emotional maturity. You can know, yeah.
As I was going to say, and Jack, you know, I'm going to end it there with you because we've had our hour. And what we're going to do is we're going to come back. And what will our subject be the next time?
Well, what would you like it to be?
I don't know. Shall I give it some thought and then we'll do another one because I've enjoyed this so much, even though my head will be like, because I'll start. But let me wind this one up, and I'm going to pop off and get that book because I want to show it to you. Jack Adams, thank you so much for this hour.
You're most welcome.
And
thank you.
We'll look forward, and I'm sure people that are watching this one will look forward to hearing more from you because I think we'll do a little series here. So thank you, and see you next time.